What would you do if your company was only 30 days away from dying? Not struggling, not losing money, dying. What if you had spent years building your dream, sacrificed everything for it, and then someone told you, you have 1 month left? Would you panic? Would you give up? Or would you fight harder than you've ever fought before? Because one man faced that exact moment, and instead of surrendering, he built one of the most valuable companies in human history. His name is Jensen Huang, and this isn't just the story of NVIDIA. This is the story of risk, failure, fear, persistence, and a dream so impossible that almost nobody believed it would survive. Today, the world knows NVIDIA as the company powering artificial intelligence, the company worth trillions of dollars, the company shaping the future. But that's not where this story begins. It begins with a young boy far away from Silicon Valley, a boy who had no idea that one day he would change the world. Imagine leaving your home as a child. Imagine entering a country where everything feels unfamiliar, the language, the culture, the people, the future. That was Jensen Huang's reality. Born in Taiwan in 1963, Jensen spent part of his childhood there before his family made a life-changing decision. They sent him to the United States. Think about that. Imagine being a child and leaving everything you've ever known. Would you be excited or terrified? Perhaps both. But what happened next was something nobody expected. Due to a misunderstanding, Jensen and his brother were sent to a boarding school in Kentucky. Not an elite academy, not a prestigious institution, a school where life was difficult, a place where he faced challenges most successful people never talk about. Imagine being young, far from home, surrounded by uncertainty, trying to understand who you are, trying to understand where you belong. Many people would have been broken by that experience, but sometimes struggle creates strength, and strength creates greatness. Jensen learned something during those years. Nobody was coming to save him. If he wanted a better future, he would have to build it himself. Have you ever had a moment when you realized that your life was your responsibility, that no one else could fight your battles for you? Jensen Huang understood that lesson very early, and he never forgot it. He worked hard, he studied, he pushed himself, not because success was guaranteed, but because failure was unacceptable. Eventually, his family reunited. Eventually, opportunities appeared, and eventually, Jensen found something that would change his life forever: engineering. Not because it was easy, because it was difficult, because he loved solving problems, because he loved building things that didn't exist before. Think about that. Some people avoid difficult problems, others run toward them. Jensen Huang ran toward them. He studied electrical engineering. He worked relentlessly. He believed that technology could transform the world. But dreams alone don't create success. Action does. After graduation, Jensen worked for technology companies. He learned, he observed, he prepared. And then one day, he made a decision that would either destroy his life or make history. He decided to leave safety behind. He decided to leave certainty behind. He decided to start a company that almost nobody believed would survive, a company called NVIDIA. But what happened next was far more painful than anyone expected. To be continued.
Have you ever made a decision so risky
that everyone around you thought you were making a mistake? A decision that could destroy your career, your savings, your future. Would you still do it? Because in 1993, Jensen Huang made exactly that decision. He was only 30 years old. He had a stable career, a promising future, a comfortable life. Most people would have protected what they already had. But Jensen Huang wasn't interested in comfort. He was interested in possibility. And possibility always demands a price. Imagine sitting in a small restaurant with 3 friends. No billion-dollar company, no investors, no guarantees. Just 3 people, 3 dreams, and 1 impossible idea. That was the beginning of NVIDIA. Think about that moment. No one knew their names. No one believed they were about to change the world. In fact, almost nobody even understood what they were trying to build. Jensen and his co-founders believed that computers would one day need extraordinary graphics processing power. Not eventually, not someday, soon. But the problem with seeing the future is that nobody else can see it with you. Have you ever believed in something that everyone else thought was impossible? That's one of the loneliest feelings in the world, and Jensen Huang was about to experience it. The early years of NVIDIA were brutal. There was no guarantee of success. There was barely enough money to survive. Every day felt like a battle. Every decision felt like a gamble. The technology industry moves fast, and when you're a small company competing against giants, one mistake can end everything. Imagine walking into the office every morning knowing that failure isn't a possibility, it's a probability. Would you still continue? Jensen Huang did, because he believed something that many people never understand. The future belongs to those willing to suffer for it. The company struggled, products failed, money disappeared, pressure increased, investors became nervous, competitors became stronger, and then something unbelievable happened. Things got even worse. One of NVIDIA's early products failed in the market. The company lost valuable time. The company lost valuable money. And most importantly, the company lost confidence. Imagine spending years building your dream and suddenly realizing that your dream might not survive. The room was silent. The pressure was unbearable. Employees were afraid. The future looked dark. For a moment, it seemed like everything was over. Have you ever worked so hard for something only to watch it collapse in front of you? That pain changes people. Some people break, others transform. Jensen Huang transformed. Instead of quitting, he made a decision that would either destroy NVIDIA forever or save it. He decided to bet everything. Not part of the company, not part of the future, everything. Think about how terrifying that must have been. There was no backup plan, no safety net, no guarantee, only belief. Belief that they could build something extraordinary, belief that failure was not the end, belief that persistence could change history. And perhaps that's one of the most important lessons in life. Sometimes success doesn't come from having the best plan. Sometimes success comes from refusing to abandon the plan you believe in. But the worst moment was still coming. Because at one point, NVIDIA was reportedly only 30 days away from running out of money. 30 days. 30 days before the dream ended. 30 days before the company disappeared. 30 days before the world forgot the name NVIDIA forever. What would you do
if your entire life's work had only 30 days left? Most people never have to answer that question. Jensen Huang did, and the answer he gave changed the future of technology forever. To be continued.
What does 30 days feel like? 30 days until your dream dies. 30 days until your employees lose their jobs. 30 days until years of sacrifice disappear forever. Can you imagine waking up every morning knowing that the clock is ticking? Because that's exactly what Jensen Huang faced. NVIDIA was running out of money. The company's future was disappearing. The technology industry was moving faster than anyone expected. Competitors were stronger. Investors were losing confidence. And inside NVIDIA, there was one terrifying question nobody wanted to ask. Was this the end? Imagine walking through the office late at night. The lights are still on. Engineers are still working. Coffee cups cover the desks. Everyone is exhausted. Everyone is afraid. But nobody wants to quit. Because when you've sacrificed everything for a dream, giving up feels worse than failure. Have you ever been so close to losing everything that you could almost feel it? Jensen Huang knew that feeling. And then he made the most important decision of his entire life. He decided to bet the company's future on a new graphics chip. Not because success was guaranteed, because there was no other choice. Think about that. Sometimes courage doesn't mean feeling brave. Sometimes courage means moving forward when you're terrified. The team worked relentlessly. Days became nights, weeks became months, pressure became unbearable, because everyone understood one thing. If this product failed, NVIDIA would disappear forever. But then something unbelievable happened. The technology that NVIDIA built for video games began attracting attention from scientists, researchers, engineers, people trying to solve problems far beyond entertainment. And that's when everything changed. Because Jensen Huang realized something almost nobody else could see. Graphics processors weren't just for games. They could change the future of computing itself. Think about that moment. The entire world saw one thing. Jensen Huang saw something completely different. And that vision would eventually transform artificial intelligence, transform technology, and transform the world. But before that happened, Jensen Huang would have to make another impossible bet. A bet so risky that even his own industry thought he was crazy. To be continued.
What if everyone told you that you were wasting your time? What if the entire industry believed that your biggest idea would never work? Would you trust them? Or would you trust yourself? Because that's exactly the decision Jensen Huang faced. By the early 2000s, NVIDIA had survived. More than that, it had become one of the world's leading graphics companies. Gamers loved its products, investors respected its growth, competitors feared its innovation. For most companies, that would have been enough. For most CEOs, that would have been success. But Jensen Huang had never been interested in enough. He was interested in the future. And the future rarely looks obvious when you're standing in the present. Have you ever had an idea that nobody around you understood? An idea so strange that people thought you were making a mistake? That's exactly what happened to Jensen Huang. He began believing that graphics processors could do something much bigger than render video games. He believed they could transform computing itself. Think about how crazy that sounded. The world saw gaming chips. Jensen Huang saw the future of science, the future of medicine, the future of artificial intelligence, the future of humanity. But almost nobody agreed. Many experts believed traditional computer processors would always dominate. Many investors didn't understand his vision. Many competitors ignored him completely. Imagine spending billions of dollars building technology that almost nobody believes the world will need. Would you still continue? Jensen Huang did, because he had learned something during those terrifying days when NVIDIA nearly died. The biggest opportunities often look like the biggest mistakes. And so he made another impossible bet. He invested heavily in GPU computing, not because customers demanded it, because he believed they eventually would. Think about that level of conviction. He wasn't reacting to the future, he was trying to create it. Years passed, money was spent, criticism increased. Some people questioned whether NVIDIA was losing its focus. Others believed Jensen Huang was risking everything again. And perhaps they were right, because every great breakthrough requires someone willing to look foolish first. Then something unbelievable happened. Researchers began using NVIDIA's graphics processors for scientific computing. Universities started paying attention. Engineers discovered that GPUs could solve problems far beyond gaming. Suddenly, the impossible idea didn't seem so impossible anymore. But Jensen Huang wasn't surprised. He had been waiting for this moment. Because vision isn't about predicting the future, it's about believing in it long enough for everyone else to catch up. Then came artificial intelligence. At first, very few people understood what was happening. AI researchers needed enormous computing power. Traditional systems struggled, and then they discovered something. NVIDIA's GPUs were exactly what they needed. Think about that moment. A technology originally designed for graphics and gaming was suddenly becoming the foundation of a new technological revolution. Can you imagine what Jensen Huang must have felt? Years of doubt, years of criticism, years of risk, and now the world was finally beginning to see what he had seen all along. AI exploded, machine learning exploded, demand exploded, and suddenly NVIDIA wasn't just a technology company anymore. It was becoming the engine of the future. The company that had once been only 30 days from bankruptcy was now helping build the next chapter of human civilization. How extraordinary is that? The dream that almost died became the dream that changed the world. But perhaps the most incredible part of Jensen Huang's story wasn't his success. It was the lesson hidden inside it. A lesson that every person with a dream needs to hear. And that lesson would make Jensen Huang one of the most influential entrepreneurs of our time.
What is the difference between a dreamer and a visionary? A dreamer imagines the future. A visionary builds it. And perhaps that's why Jensen Huang's story is so extraordinary. Because he didn't just predict the future, he spent decades building it. By the 2010s, something incredible was happening. Artificial intelligence was no longer science fiction. Researchers were making breakthroughs. Machines were learning. Technology was evolving faster than anyone expected. And at the center of this revolution was a company that had once been 30 days from death, NVIDIA. Think about that. The company that almost disappeared. The company that many people believed would fail.
the company that survived only because one man refused to quit, was now becoming one of the most important companies in the world. Can you imagine what that must have felt like, to remember every sleepless night, every failed product, every rejection, every moment you wondered if the dream was over, and then to realize that all of it had prepared you for this moment? But Jensen Huang wasn't celebrating, not really, because he understood something that many successful people forget. Success is not a destination, it's a responsibility. Have you ever noticed that the people who change the world rarely stop after winning? Because they aren't trying to win, they're trying to create. And Jensen Huang never stopped creating. He continued investing, continued innovating, continued betting on the future, even when others were afraid, even when others doubted, even when others couldn't see what he saw. Then something happened that changed everything. Artificial intelligence exploded, not gradually, not slowly, exploded. The world suddenly realized that AI could transform industries, medicine, science, education, business, entertainment, human life itself. And there was one company positioned at the center of that transformation: NVIDIA. Imagine waking one morning and realizing that the impossible dream you've spent 30 years building has become one of the most important technologies on Earth. How do you even process that? How do you comprehend that level of transformation? The young immigrant boy, the engineer, the entrepreneur who nearly lost everything, was now helping shape the future of humanity. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Jensen Huang wasn't his wealth. It wasn't his fame. It wasn't even his success. It was his mindset. Because despite building one of the most valuable companies in history, Jensen Huang never stopped talking about failure. Think about that. Most successful people talk about victory. Jensen Huang talks about suffering. He once said something extraordinary. He suggested that he wouldn't want young people to experience only success, because greatness often comes from adversity, because resilience comes from struggle, because strength comes from pain. What an incredible idea! The experiences we try hardest to avoid may be the experiences that shape us the most. Imagine if NVIDIA had never been close to bankruptcy. Imagine if Jensen Huang had never experienced fear. Imagine if everything had been easy. Would he have become the same person? Would NVIDIA have become the same company? Perhaps not, because comfort rarely creates greatness. Struggle does. And maybe that's why Jensen Huang's story matters so much. Not because he became rich, not because he built a trillion-dollar company, but because he proved something that every person with a dream needs to hear. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the path to success. And that lesson would become his greatest legacy.
What if the greatest advantage in life isn't intelligence? What if it isn't money? What if it isn't talent? What if the greatest advantage is simply the ability to endure? Because if there's one lesson Jensen Huang spent his life teaching the world, it's this:
The people who change history are often the people who refuse to quit when everyone else does. Today, when people hear the name NVIDIA, they think of artificial intelligence. They think of billion-dollar technologies. They think of stock markets. They think of wealth. But they don't see the young immigrant boy trying to find his place in the world. They don't see the entrepreneur sitting in a room wondering if his company had only 30 days left to live. They don't see the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty. Think about that. The world remembers success, but success is only the final chapter. The real story is everything that happened before. Jensen Huang once faced a question that every dreamer eventually faces. Is this worth it? Is the sacrifice worth it? Is the risk worth it? Is the suffering worth it? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Have you ever been so exhausted that quitting felt easier than continuing? Jensen Huang has, many times, and every time he made the same decision: continue. Not because he knew he would succeed, not because he had guarantees, but because he believed that regret would hurt more than failure. And perhaps that's one of the most powerful lessons anyone can learn. Failure hurts, but giving up hurts forever. Imagine if Jensen Huang had quit when NVIDIA nearly went bankrupt. Imagine if he had listened to the people who told him GPUs were only useful for video games. Imagine if he had decided that the future was too uncertain. The world would be different. Artificial intelligence would be different. Technology would be different. And millions of people would never know his name. Because every breakthrough begins with someone willing to look foolish. Every innovation begins with someone willing to fail. Every empire begins with someone willing to suffer. Today, NVIDIA is one of the most valuable companies in human history. Its technology powers artificial intelligence. Its inventions influence science. Its vision helps shape the future. And at the center of that story stands a man who once faced the possibility of losing everything. Can you imagine looking back on your life and realizing that your greatest failures became your greatest strengths? That your worst moments prepared you for your greatest victories? That your fear became your fuel? NVIDIA can, because he lived it. He proved that vision matters. He proved that courage matters. He proved that persistence matters. But perhaps most importantly, he proved that extraordinary success doesn't belong to the people who never fail. It belongs to the people who refuse to stop. So, if you're struggling right now, if you're afraid, if you're failing, if you're wondering whether your dream is worth fighting for, remember Jensen Huang. Remember the young immigrant. Remember the entrepreneur who was 30 days away from losing everything. Remember the man who continued when quitting would have been easier. Because maybe your greatest setback is not the end of your story. Maybe it's the beginning. Because every entrepreneur, every company, every empire, every legend started with uncertainty, started with failure, started with a dream. And every legend started from zero. And perhaps the next legend could be you.